Welcome to this event, another series in the Gaglers Pride Month. So happy Pride Month, everyone. Pride is in fact the entire month long and not just one debaucherous weekend. So it's my pleasure today to introduce two leading advocates in the gay civil rights movement, Kris and Sandy Stier. They have been at the forefront of the Prop 8 litigation battle, and we're very honored to have them with us here today. They've been together since '97, were married in 2004, and have raised perhaps their greatest achievement, 4 boys together. The 2 youngest ones just graduated last weekend, just in time to celebrate or recognize Supreme Court decisions that will be coming down next week. The Supreme Court is taking their time and is going to roll out momentous decisions all together next week on gay marriage, Voting Rights Act, affirmative action. So next week is going to be very exciting. Kris is executive director of the First 5 Years Fund, which is a national organization that focuses on investments in quality early childhood education programs for disadvantaged children. And Sandy, on the far right, is the director of information systems for Alameda County Healthcare Services Agency. And I'm not going to tell you too much about their story because they're going to do a much better job of telling it themselves. So I'll hand it off to you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us very much. So first of all, I'd like to say if you want to call Kris Perry, feel free, because she is now known as Perry to the broader community and to the media. We're so happy to be here and to talk to you about where we are with the case for marriage equality. It's been a great journey and an exciting one, and we feel very privileged to get to be in the position of representing such an important civil rights issue. Today we'd like to kind of take you through some different parts of the case and show you a couple of video clips that hopefully will be interesting. We want to use most of our time for Q&A to hear from you and get a better idea of what your questions are and what your concerns are and how you view this particular case. So starting off, we have this picture of us in front of the Supreme Court. We were there in March of this year. The transcripts are available online. You can Google them if you wanted to. They're quite interesting. We were there with our kids and our legal team, including Enrique Monagas, who is here with us today. So he's going to help field some of the legal questions if you have anything that you want to ask. Let's go ahead and get going.
So nothing of this scale and scope is possible with just a couple of people. We're part of a really large team made up of funders and attorneys and advocates. What you see here before you are just a sampling of the people that have been invested in this from the very beginning. The Reiners, Michelle and Rob Reiner, along with Dustin Lance Black and Bruce Cohen and Cleve Jones, are on the board of the American Foundation for Equal Rights and have made it their mission to not only contribute financially, but to help others contribute financially. And that, in fact, has been one of the most important roles in this. A case that takes 4 years to travel through the legal system, generate some legal fees, even when people are being generous with their time, including pro bono. But those board members have done a huge amount to help this movement. And then above them, you can see the other plaintiffs, Jeff and Paul, next to Chad Griffin, who has since moved on to the Human Rights Campaign, and our attorneys, David Boyes and Ted Olson, along with Christina Shockey and Adam Umhafer, who are also some of the founding members of the American Foundation for Equal Rights. But one of the more sort of fun stories in all of this is, how did Sandy and I actually come to be a part of this team? We are not Hollywood A-listers. We are not attorneys. And we are not longtime legendary gay rights activists like Cleve Jones. We are, in fact, just ordinary people that were busy raising our families and going to work every day when we learned that there was possibly going to be a challenge to Proposition 8. And we learned that through our friend Chad Griffin, who at the time was working with Rob Reiner in Los Angeles on a number of other political issues, not the least of which was early childhood education, which is what I have dedicated my career toward. And I was on a phone call with Chad just out of the blue one day, and he mentioned that he was putting a group of people together because they were really upset about how Proposition 8 had passed. And I asked him a little bit about it, and he said, well, Rob and I were at lunch with Michelle, and we were talking about how angry we were. And if you know the Reiners, they tend to be rather loud. So apparently they were overheard. And they were overheard at the Polo Lounge by someone that used to be related to Ted Olson, a former sister-in-law. And she came over and said, you may not believe this, but there is someone in Washington, D.C. who cares about this who would probably help you. And they said, who? And they said Ted Olson. And they all said, really? Ted Olson, as in Bush v. Gore Ted Olson? And they said yes. And that's how this all began. Chad knew me, Chad ended up meeting Ted, I know Sandy, and we ended up becoming...
We live together.
We actually know each other quite well. And so really it was, these things kind of came together rather quickly, these relationships. And I wanted to be sure that you understood how we ended up in this, because we are not like the rest of them.
And can you walk us through your decision-making process on that a little bit? Because I think here we've got a room of some young, aspiring, perhaps future civil rights leaders here. And it takes a lot of courage to put yourself in the spotlight, put your name on the line. And what was your decision-making process in deciding to step up and do that? I mean, there are lots of angry people out there, but it's really easy to be angry in our living rooms.
Yeah, well, we're particularly angry because we have, as we said, a lot of kids, and so we're mad most of the time. It's getting better now that they're graduating and moving on. But it was actually a fairly quick and easy decision for us on some level, and it's really because we felt so strongly that marriage should be available to us and to everybody in our country, and that voting on our rights just seemed completely and fundamentally wrong. So we had such a problem with Proposition 8 being on the ballot in the first place, even being part of the voting process, and it didn't make any sense to us. And then when we heard about this possible legal challenge, we both said, oh my gosh, what a great place to address the issue. We have to be protected. We're a minority, we need to be protected from the majority. So for us as individuals, I think we both came fairly quickly to feel very supportive of this initiative, or approaching it in this way. In terms of the family, we decided between the two of us that we felt comfortable moving forward, and we believed in it, and we thought it was the right team and the right challenge and the right players. And then we just went, down the row of kids and asked each one individually, how would you feel about it? Because we felt strongly that if any one of the boys didn't feel comfortable with our being involved in it, that we wouldn't do it, because it does impact them as well. Even though they're tangential, there's no way of getting out of the fact that it does impact them. And the boys were all really very supportive, in part because they are somewhat narcissistic, to be totally honest. So, like, what do you think about us being in the case? Well, that's fine, but I need some money. Like, okay. And yeah, I believe in it, and I think it's the right thing to do, but I'm not saying that just for you. I'm saying it for society. I'm like, okay, be politically correct, that's totally fine. So the boys were supportive of it, and that was all we needed. We didn't really look for anybody else's approval. We didn't check in with the rest of our families, just our kids and each other, and then we moved forward.
The courage part, though, is sometimes, you can mistake thinking you're signing up for something that was more like the other challenges had been, which was more of an administrative process that seemed, actually it was still a big leap of faith for us to be involved in something that would have been more about a paper-driven process, but it became a very people-driven process. And I feel really fortunate that we were supported by a group of lawyers and advocates that really helped us, move from something more sort of quiet to something a little bit louder. And I would just say to all of you, as you go through your lives and you find yourself in situations where you feel that you have not been treated fairly, you have not been given protection, and you are not in a situation that is really acceptable to you, there are numerous ways to resolve that problem, one of which is to hire lawyers and go through the court system, but it is not the only way. And in fact, it wouldn't, if it weren't for years and years, decades really, of other people standing up, like Harvey Milk and Cleve Jones and Phyllis and Dell and so many others saying, fighting back on a more sort of political front or through a grassroots advocacy. A legal challenge would have seemed really premature or really ill-advised. And so it's really a combination of events that lead to a moment in time like this where we know that everything's polling in favor of gay marriage now, and so much is shifting, but it's really a rare time to see a social movement happen within a few years, but it's really after many years. So moving past sort of who some of the players are and where we've been, we want to talk a little bit about what actually happened in that trial that we ended up being a part of. There were many, many witnesses for our side, the people that came to court and said, this is why Proposition 8 is harmful and unconstitutional. And the witnesses really were on the full spectrum of experts from Yale and Harvard and UC Berkeley and UC Davis, and people that have been studying sociology and political power and the institution of marriage, frankly, for their entire careers, were there to testify on behalf of our team, as well as lay people like Sandy and I, Jeff and Paul, the mayor of San Diego, and even someone that had been put through reparative therapy. So we had a great blend of like real stories from real people, as well as witnesses from all across really all over the world. The more telling piece of this story really was how few witnesses the other side had. And I'll let Sandy talk a little about the 2 witnesses that the other side had. And just when you look at the numbers, it comes out very unbalanced.
Right, so there's nothing like being on the winning team, right? And it was very clear in court within, in no time that we were definitely on the winning team. Not only did we have great expert witnesses, but they talked about some of the most salient arguments that could be presented in terms of economics and the political process and how really underrepresented gays are and violence against gay people and how many different rights are associated with marriage, including adoption and immigration, so many different things, and how important it is to have equality. But on the other side, they really couldn't drum up any good expert witnesses because there really aren't any. The ones that they did bring forth, number one was David Blankenhorn, and some of you may have heard of him. He kind of has switched sides since he did his testimony, and in fact, he really switched sides during the trial, which is it's an unusual thing, and you're going to see a little bit of that in a second in one of these clips. But his really expertise, even though he ran an organization for traditional family, his expertise was actually in Victorian wood cabinetry. Now, and that's where he had peer-reviewed articles, Victorian wood cabinetry. But unfortunately, you can't really take the knowledge from Victorian cabinetry making and apply it to equal rights or family structure. So that was a very awkward situation for them. And then the other person they brought forth actually had to be subpoenaed to be involved in the trial because after his deposition with David Boies, which is not a fun experience in anyone's life. I can assure you that having David Boies depose you would be incredibly difficult. He is like a surgeon in a courtroom, if that makes any sense. And you actually almost felt empathic for witnesses that testified in ways that you didn't agree with, but I started to feel empathy for them because it would be so difficult to be on the stand with David Boies. And
they did have 2 witnesses who tried really hard, and it was an interesting day when they were up there days. But what's been great about the case so far, we'll look at the next slide, is that even though we were there to argue for our due process and equal protection rights and how Prop 8 violated both of those things, I feel like it's hard to synthesize a 3-week trial into some simple concepts, but for the purpose of moving through this quickly and helping you understand what the primary arguments centered around due process and equal protection were both. And we felt that really, the witnesses made the case that marriage is a fundamental right, that it is tied to your life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and that for individuals who are not allowed access to those fundamental rights, their lives are really diminished. The quality of your life is greatly diminished by not having the power to say, I do, as a grown-up. It is the most important decision you make as an adult, who you choose to spend your life with. And Nancy Cott made the argument that during slavery, one of the key features, or one of the most important rights that the slaves wanted was the right to marry. Because if you don't have the full force of the phrase, I do, as a free person, then you are not like other people. And everyone knows it. One of the things that we pointed out in our testimony was how humiliating it can be as a lesbian or gay person who wants to marry, to be in the company of those who can. They know that you are not an adult the way that they are, and that you are viewed as a second-class citizen by people you work with, by your own family, by your own children, and frankly, people that are running government. And it is a very difficult way to live, to have people know that you are not capable of making that decision. So what was important about the case was for so many experts to come in and show how it's harmful to us psychologically, financially, in so many ways. So what was great was, even though the trial itself was not live streamed like this talk is right now, it was captured in transcripts, and those transcripts were later turned into a play called 8. And we wanted to show you, Alex, a couple clips from the play 8 so that you could sort of get the flavor of what was happening in the courtroom.
It's easy for people who want to deprive gays and lesbians of their rights to make all kinds of statements in campaign literature or on TV where they can't be cross-examined. but the witness stand is a lonely place to lie.
You cannot say after the fact, we are going to take away the constitutional right to liberty, privacy, association that we already tell you you have. That is not acceptable.
I am asking you to tell me how it would harm opposite-sex marriages.
All right, Your Honor, my answer is, I don't know.
How convinced are you that you are gay?
I'm convinced because at 47 years old, I have fallen in love one time, and it is with Kris.
We would love to have a family, but the timeline for us has always been marriage first.
You two are about the most responsible, important, meaningful things I will ever do in my whole life. And don't you ever let anyone ever make you feel any different. You got it?
Yes, Mom. Yes, Mom.
We put fear and prejudice on trial.
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 The word marriage has a meaning. If it wasn't so important, we wouldn't be here today.
So that was just a brief clip with just a few little actors that you may have recognized. And Jamie Lee Curtis did a fantastic job playing me. You probably noticed the physical resemblance. No, that was an amazing thing. It was actually used as a fundraiser for the case, which is great, but also, more importantly, to really educate different people and different audiences about what happened in that trial, and to really bring the most salient points and the most salient arguments into a kind of a venue where everybody you could really absorb it. So this the play has been in many, many colleges, community colleges, high schools, community theaters, big, huge theaters all over the country, and even in different countries. And it's great. So it's in Montana, it's in Utah, it's in wonderful little pockets of the country that really need to see this kind of information. And we're really grateful that Lance put this together and took advantage of the fact that they wouldn't allow cameras in the courtroom during the trial, which is something that happened on the very first day. So moving on, the case timeline and public opinion. This is just kind of a brief graphic of where the case has been. We did enter this case 4 years ago. We had the trial in January 2011, nearly a 3-week trial. We won. We went to appeal, and we won again. And then we had a detour at the California Supreme Court, and finally ended up in the federal Supreme Court in March. And now, of course, we're waiting for a ruling. And as you can see, public opinion has gone nowhere but up, really, in terms of supporting gay marriage since we began this process.
So we wanted to show you one other video clip of some of the actual people, not the actors that played people in the trial, which was a way of taking you back 4 years and showing you some of the exciting things that happened in the courtroom and why we won. So many witnesses, so much powerful testimony. But now you have the combination of not only that, but the shift in public opinion. Combined with what happened in the courtroom, and now all culminating in what we hope will be a very positive ruling next week. So when we went to Washington, D.C. a couple of months ago for the hearing to watch Ted Olson and others argue this case, we were accompanied by many others. So we'll show you a little bit about what happened on that day. Well, here it is, the day before we go to the Supreme Court to hear Ted Olson and the Solicitor General argue our case in front of the Supreme Court. So today, in order to get ready, we're going to the National Archives to see the U.S. Constitution, which is a huge highlight for both Sandy and I and our kids.
We're definitely excited to be here. We're proud to be here. We're certainly nervous, cautiously optimistic, but most importantly, we're hopeful.
Right now, we're just preparing for the argument, and it's to go through and make sure that we have every possible question, every possible argument the other side can come up with, and we've done as much as we can to prepare to respond to those.
When we set out 4 years ago, we said we were going to make this case before the Supreme Court, before the highest court in the land, and I think we're all going to be just in awe to watch Ted Olson up there making our case.
It's a dialogue among the justices. They use their questions to explore issues, so you can't read too much into anything.
We think history will look back and feel proud that our country came together to support equality for all people, and we're just so grateful that we get to be part of this very important civil rights issue.
We're Kris and Sandy's sons, so I mean, we just tag along for the ride and
try to make them look good. I think Ellie and I are both immensely proud of our moms and what they're doing. Tomorrow morning we'll get up very early and we will make our way to the Supreme Court. Sounds strange even saying it out loud.
We have great clients. They are in love, they want to get married.
But this is the defining civil rights issue of our generation. It is a time that I think that we advance the agenda of equality, not just for gays and lesbians, but for everybody.
It's freezing, but of course I'm so excited to be here.
We've been on the case for a very, very long time, and it's been a great journey, and we've accomplished a lot so far.
Still trying to wrap my head around the fact that this is actually real and happening and that we're here, but it's an incredibly exciting and historic morning.
This is exactly what our judicial system is for, and this is where we should be on this day.
A lot of people that made this possible by their generous support, and we want to thank them for it, and thank the millions of people around the country that have worked so hard to make this possible.
To me, all of this work, everything that we're doing is about the next generation, so that the young people out there who are just coming of age, falling in love for the first time, they do so without judgment.
I know what I'm going to be seeing from our side. Ted Olson is going to be brilliant, as he always is, and he will make the points that we feel necessary.
It's incredible, you know, it's a historic day for the LGBT rights movement.
I'm already anxiously waiting for June. I'm already nervous. I'm like, okay, do they have it yet? Did they decide it? And it's only been 10 minutes.
It's a little bit of a relief, but at the same time, now we wait. And we know we have to wait for 3 months before we find out what they've decided.
The most important battle, I think, clearly has been won. But one thing I thought about when there was, again, sitting in the back of Harvey's old camera store on Castro Street, and Harvey saying, "You've got to come out," and it's pretty extraordinary.
We're not done in this movement for LGBT equality. So next is get back to work and keep fighting to make sure the next generation's lives are better than ours. I think that's our job as Americans.
So I mentioned the way public opinion has shifted over the last 4 years, and this is just a way of showing you how many polls have been done, very reputable national polls over the 4-year period, and how great this trend is. This is a great trend line for us, any movement. Mm-hmm. Moving on to the next slide, showing you a little bit about how the country is shifting in terms of legalizing marriage equality. You can see which states, the dark blue states, do have it already. Blue states, the light blue, are obviously working toward it. And the gray is all the work we still have to do, because as exciting as it is to have New England and Western states taking a hard look at this, look what's happening in the middle of the country and in the South. There's a lot of work to do. So, Sandy, you're the legal expert. Take it away.
That's right. I'm so glad to be recognized for what I really am. After being in the trial for 3 weeks, you feel like a legal expert. I actually felt like I got a master's degree in marriage equality. It was fantastic. So what could the court decide to do? Well, they could decide to do the brave thing, which is to rule on the merits of the case. That's what we hope they do. And a ruling on the merits of the case would be a 50-state ruling. It's what we hope fervently for. It's a big ask, it's a big win, and we think it's, it would be an amazing thing to have. But there are different options of what could actually happen. They could uphold Proposition 8, they could decline to rule, and they could, there's another one that'll pop up in a second. They could strike down Proposition 8. So if they strike down Proposition 8, if we can win a couple different ways. The A is the merits ruling. We could also win on standing, which just means the proponents didn't have standing to bring the case to court. They could also just dismiss the case, which is somewhat unlikely and would have a similar impact as standing, which is basically that California would have marriage equality, and potentially the states that, depending on how the ruling is written, potentially the states that have domestic partnerships. If they uphold Proposition 8, that is, of course, the worst thing that can happen. That means we roll back the clock. So those are the options. That's my very in-depth legal analysis on the topic. And for more information,
right
we have a brilliant lawyer right here who can answer any question that you have.
That wraps up the part of the presentation where we have pictures and videos to show you. And now we would like to just interact with you. So if the lights could come up and we could just have a conversation about the things that you may be wanting to ask that are somewhat complicated and a little bit arcane, because we showed you 3 possible outcomes, but if you start talking to anybody that's a legal expert, they'll tell you there are dozens of possible outcomes, and not to mention how many different days this could all occur. Right now we think the one day they're supposed to meet is Monday, but everyone says they can't do all the cases they have in one day, so they'll be adding days. So we have lots to look forward to next week, and we would really love to just talk to you about your questions and thoughts about this.
What is next week going to look like for you? So once the decision's handed down, what are you guys going to be doing? And then second part to that question is, after next week, what is your political life going to look like? How are you going to continue to be politically engaged in this? Are you going to take a break, which would be okay too, because you've done a lot of work for us already. But you know, what are your thoughts on that going forward?
Well, we think we are probably going to stop suing people, first of all. We've learned that lawsuits are long and expensive ways to resolve problems, so we'll let that go for a while, but we will always fight certainly for equal rights. Now, what we're really hoping, we'll be in DC next week, so we're going Sunday in anticipation of a possible ruling Monday, if not Monday, and they add additional days. It could be Wednesday or Thursday. We really hope to be at the Supreme Court, ideally inside, and hear the decision being read. And we're really hoping that we have something very special to celebrate. So we'd celebrate with our legal team and many of the founders of the case, and of course each other and the other plaintiffs. And then we become really fairly involved in some of the media that will happen as a result of a ruling. And it's a wild and crazy week for us. And honestly, then we go right back to our normal lives, you know, getting kids up and making them go to their summer jobs and all that kind of stuff, and go to jobs ourselves. But we do really feel very, very hopeful that we're going to have a positive outcome. It's just a matter of how big, and so we're full of anticipation.
The future political work, oddly enough, we don't see this as a political activity. I know that may strike some of you as odd. It just feels like an extension of our personal, sort of disagreement with the law, Proposition 8, and one way of resolving that disagreement was to go to court. And then we didn't take a political path to resolve this problem, and others may. If there's a very bad outcome, in other words, Proposition 8 continues to exist, political people are already talking about what they'll do about that, but that's their job. They're full-time politicians. That's what they do for a living. Or there are voters out there that may come together and decide that they want to do something about it as a group of voters. But that was not really our method. We think that actually isn't the kind of permanent solution this deserves. Other kinds of problems that exist for lesbian and gay individuals and couples are going to continue to happen. We see already within the immigration reform debate how much the gay couple, international couple issue has emerged as a sticking point for some people. We know recently HUD released a study that shows that lesbian and gay couples are discriminated against in their pursuit of housing. There are other problems still that exist around bullying, and even the way the K-12 or education world is viewing whether or not to teach kids about different kinds of families. I mean, it's a really pervasive problem to get people to recognize that lesbian and gay people and couples and families and kids are equal, not less than, not better than, equal. And that will be, frankly, something we'll probably have to tackle our whole lives because we're getting rather old, and there's not that much time left.
I'm getting pretty old.
You're pretty old, but there's a lot to do.
and one more question before opening it up. I want to kind of step back from, so gay marriage has been kind of the headliner issue in the civil rights kind of advocacy in our community. And I think it's galvanized a lot of people. It's united people within the gay community and also our allies in a way that's been really great to see. and as we saw with the map, I mean, this struggle is going to continue unless the Supreme Court goes big. How do you think we can kind of maintain that unity and leverage it in addressing these other issues? There are also major LGBT health issues. Very little research has been done about the different health challenges that our particular communities face, so that you can't even design health programs or medical care in a way that suits us best, because there's really no research and no knowledge around it, around domestic violence, sexual violence, bullying, things like that. Do you have any thoughts about how we can maintain that unity going forward?
I think we're having a great conversation with Enrique before we started, where really the lesbian gay community is the most perfect example of such a cross-section of the country as a group. So unlike any other minority group, you are different from your family. And so we have to create that. We have to create family. And one way that happens is we're really diverse. Every racial group, both genders, all kinds of different sexual orientation, decisions, as well as socioeconomic, people dealing with different health issues. We are a full-blown cross-section of the country, of the world. And so in some ways we are instructive to other groups that are dealing with issues, that some of which you named, as a way to come together as a coalition. And what was most probably sort of catalytic and interesting about this case was a bipartisan approach to a problem, which right now seems to be one of the hardest things for people to do in this country, is to come together across party lines. But frankly, that's not the only way to solve problems. And I think what's been really helpful for Sandy and I is to see ourselves as part of this really big quilt of people and different approaches. And I think if we could take that whole group and keep moving forward to solve new problems together, we'll solve more problems together.
I, like probably many of us, had a kind of civics, high school view of the Supreme Court. It's that, stone building with guys in robes. But a bunch of us at Google sat and listened to the transcripts together in a room, like the moment they were released. And I know for me, there was this sudden wait a minute, this isn't abstract, it's about me. So I'm wondering, if that happened to me, what happened to you personally sitting in the Supreme Court? I mean, did that change your view of the Supreme Court or of the process or of what it means?
It did, really. It's fascinating being in the Supreme Court and to see the energy of others trying to get into the court as well. For 4 days, there were people camping out trying to get those very few public spots in the court, and it was snowing. I mean, it was a rough time. But to go into the courtroom, it's very highly structured. I mean, a lot of security, and it's a very formal way of entering the courtroom. We weren't seated with the other plaintiffs or anybody in our team necessarily. We're just seated in the general audience, but Kris and I were fortunate that we could sit together. It was actually a little bit hard. But being in the courtroom, it's an intimate environment. I don't know if you've ever been into the Supreme Court before. It's of course available for public tour, but it's not a huge courtroom. It's a fairly small courtroom, very grand, very beautiful. But from any place that you're sitting, you feel like you can really see the justices. You can see the look on their face. And we have fairly good seats. Actually, we're towards the front and towards the middle. And you could really view their expression as they spoke or as they, kind of had an emotional response to what somebody else on the bench said. And I guess I always knew that just, from the lawyers telling us how the court works, that it's a 1-hour hearing. We knew that, of course. And that our side only had 30 minutes. And out of our 30 minutes, we had 10 minutes that would be used by the Solicitor General from the White House, which is a good thing. But Ted Olson had 20 minutes to make his argument. That's a very short amount of time. And he was into about the first sentence of his argument when he was immediately interrupted by one of the justices. And that's how the whole thing goes. So regardless of what beautiful thing you've planned to say, it will be interrupted, and then you'll immediately be responding to questions. And so the justices immediately took them down into the path of standing, around the issue of standing, as they did with Charles Cooper, the lead attorney on the other side as well. And we spent a lot of time on standing. I didn't expect that. And that was a little disconcerting, actually, because we kept thinking, let's talk about the merits, let's talk about the most important things, let's talk about equal protection. We don't want to talk about standing for too long because we don't want to miss the most important, points that Ted is going to make today. So that was one thing that the justices really orchestrate the courtroom, and the Chief Justice really is clearly in charge of the courtroom. And then some of the comments that justices made, if you've listened to them, you might have a similar reaction. I found them curious. or puzzling, and more than I expected to. I thought it would be more just judicial, more television-like or something, but they really went down some paths that were very unexpected, and their comments were unexpected, and that was definitely a twist. What was your response to it?
I think you covered everything.
I probably did.
Comprehensive answer. Yes. Congratulations. It was odd to be there as a lesbian asking 9 Supreme Court justices to protect me from a law in the state that I love, because it was really harming me. And I for all of you that listened, I hope that you could feel the importance of the moment versus the words, because it was a moment. And it was, the courtroom was just electric. It was packed, it was shoulder to shoulder, members of Congress, members of White House administration, public, lawyers from the Supreme Court bar, all packed in there together, anxiously awaiting to hear these arguments and to understand and to be a part of a historic moment. And it really was a historic moment. And I'm very, very honored to have even been in the courtroom at all. It was amazing.
And there were moments when justices said things that you've so appreciated. When Breyer said, what about the kids?
Kennedy.
Kennedy. What about all the kids that aren't here? That's the legal analysis part. We have to be a voice for them as well. How do they get represented? And it was, heartwarming to see that somebody thought about that part as well, because that's one of the things that has really compelled us to be involved in this case. It's really not just about us. We're in pretty good shape in our lives, but we really care about the generations coming up, and we want that to be acknowledged in the courtroom as well.
Okay, so the question was that opponents often use the argument sort of based on the detrimental effects of same-sex marriage on children. And the question was what you guys thought about that, and why that argument seems to have such traction or not at all.
Well, the thing that definitely happened around Proposition 8 is they used this idea that you should be afraid of lesbian and gay people as a campaign strategy. It was part of the campaign rhetoric, and it was highly effective. I don't know if you can remember back to the Proposition 8 ads, but they often had children in them and their parents talking to them about, it's scary now that you're going to school and you're learning about these families, or you're going to, it's scary to us as parents that you may end up marrying someone of the same sex. So they used it very prominently in the campaign, Proposition 8, and they did something really effective. They created a problem in their campaign called, gay people are scary, and then they created a solution called don't let them get married. And it was just effective enough that they won. Now, in court, there were attempts made to repeat some of those statements, but they didn't hold up in the courtroom because they didn't have witnesses who could support that, as you point out. So the judge was patient, really, for them to describe what they wanted to say about that, but was not as patient when they couldn't produce an expert witness to support it with data. Our side, on the other hand, had multiple witnesses that had done long-term studies on large samples of either adults that were gay or on just the average, person that didn't support that at all. So the reason it lives on, I think, is a question for all of us: is where does that come from? What institution is promulgating this belief that lesbian and gay people are harmful towards children, don't protect children? There are lots of other more negative terms that people use to describe lesbian and gay people in relationship to children, and it's not supported by evidence. So I think what we hope is that if marriage equality starts to occur, that we'll be able to, over time, demonstrate through our actions and the way that we live and the way that we parent, that these things just no longer hold up, and that those beliefs will slowly diminish. But it will take a really long time. It's like I said, we probably won't be alive when it stops being.
That's kind of a bummer statement.
Well, these things take generations, unfortunately, to unwind. I think it's a long-standing. Homophobia has been a long-standing problem, and it's not going to disappear even with a really promising ruling, unfortunately.
I was in a room many years ago at Meet in the Middle in Fresno, and it was like a war room. We all had the same outcome. We wanted marriage equality, but so many different paths to get there. And no one could really come up with, sort of a common way to do it. And then this all happened. And it was like, out of right field, a few people decided this was the right course. And I'm curious, using that sort of success and how that was determined, how do we apply that to these other problems that you're describing that are going to continue? Do we wait as leaders for, sort of a common decision to be made, or do we learn from this and just go for what we think individually as a small group is the right thing to do?
One of the most important contributors to the success of this particular strategy was really pulling together the best and the brightest. I mean, Ted Olson and David Boies, they are absolutely the best and the brightest among constitutional lawyers, and with a great deal of experience at the Supreme Court. So that's very, very important. And we really had the solid initial backing of enough funders from different parts, different political parties that are kind of across the board, that they could give it the boost it needed to get the case going. So for us, I think it was an unusual mix to have that strength early on, and it certainly contributed to the success. I think Kris pointed out something really important earlier, which is the bipartisan method is very, very important. We didn't, and Ted and David leading our case is such a great example of that. They come from two very different parties, and yet they immediately took it out of kind of that world and said, this isn't about politics at all. This is about equal rights. Has nothing to do with politics. And I think that was a successful strategy as well, because then you get more people on board, more people supporting it, and I would hope that we can kind of address a lot of the issues that we're looking at in a similar way, whether they're gay rights issues or other civil rights issues like education or healthcare. These are human fundamental rights, and we don't want them to be partisan rights if at all possible, or partisanship involved in it.
The common denominator is leadership. I honestly believe whatever problem you're trying to solve, you need to be a leader. You have to take risk. You have to be passionate and single-minded about your goal. And you can't give up. You cannot give up. I don't know what everybody here will come across some bridge, and you have to lead other people across it. What's really interesting about the people that stand out in this case is every single person to a person is a leader in their own right, and yet there are so many involved in this at one time. You mentioned the example of you're working hard to create some pushback on a political front because it was a voter mandate, and you're trying to figure out how to unvote it, right? Well, guess what? Somebody was a leader in another room and thought there was a different way to move ahead, and he led a group of people down that road. And that is the key ingredient to change, is leadership. And I really can't encourage you enough to find, your problem and solve it and be the leader on it. And you'll end up doing something that may not be the thing that won, but you contributed to a win, either way.
Yeah.
Could you speak a little as to your efforts for education for younger kids?
I will. There's a question about what I'm working on around early education. I happen to know that you have a really high quality early learning center here at Google. I'd really love to see it if anybody can run me over there. But what I've been working on in my career for 25 years has been advocating for children, particularly children under the age of 5, because just like the marriage equality fight and using data and evidence to prove that it is no longer acceptable to exclude a group of people from a fundamental institution, there are a group of kids in this country who are being excluded from the education system, and it is affecting the trajectory of their entire life in ways that are very, very harmful. And it's very much based on economic factors, and that is all. So what the president has done around marriage equality and early learning is say, in order for our country to be strong and for us to be together, we need to be educated and we need to stop discriminating against groups of people. And I feel like that is a common theme in both efforts. Early learning is based on the fact that most of us, almost everybody, gains 90% of their brain weight before they turn 3. And the synaptic connections that are happening most rapidly then. And unfortunately, by the time you turn 5, they start to prune. Your brain is pruning, and so that's why we all have memory problems later in life. You probably don't at Google, but the rest of us do, because the truth is those pathways are used later on for high-level executive function analytical skills that allow you to have really great jobs like you all have, or to work on hard issues like we're working on. You have to have a lot of capacity, honestly, to deal with so much that comes at you in this world today. So early learning, and for me, early learning and marriage equality are very similar in the sense that they really help people reach their potential and not be inhibited. or told that they're not, going to be successful or going to be a good person. And it's fun to work on both. And I keep working on the other thing because that's the job I have. Sandy is a healthcare technology systems director, which also I think really is intended to help people have access to something they need to be.
So maybe just to close out as a final question, you've talked about this a little bit already, but what can the people in this room do? And now I'm going to ask a bad question. I mean, what's our obligation, right? So what is our obligation either as a member of a minority class or group to help broaden equality for other people in my group or in other minority groups, or for potential allies? What kind of obligations do we have, and how should we execute them?
We should have lots and lots of children if at all possible, because we need the data on parenting. Okay, and do not mess your kids up. That would be helpful. I'm not saying we didn't mess our kids up, but we tried. It was hard.
Just do your best.
That's right. Do your best. I think on some level, Cleve Jones always quotes Harvey Milk in this, quote that you heard, come out, be honest. And I think that's really one easy thing that we are obligated to do. Be honest, don't hide yourself. Talk about difficult issues. Keep talking to, relatives at old school and all those people, and help them make the switch slowly. We've really seen, with the public opinion shift, and we've seen it certainly in the polls, but we've also seen it in the people that we love and care about, our families and friends, that people come to things slowly, like Obama came to it slowly, right? But that has to be okay. You have to give people a chance to change and be okay with it, and not hold it against them too much, right? That it took a long time or that it's happening slowly. But I think supporting change is the best way to model the future that we want to have for our own kids. We want them to feel comfortable coming out, then be comfortable being out, right? And if we can do that, that's something everybody can do.
I think you live with a lot of integrity and passion, and be a model what you think we should all be doing wherever you are. And it can be on a very small one-on-one basis with somebody. It does not have to be on the scale of the United States Supreme Court. I think it's actually the smaller interactions that happen between individuals at work, one-on-one, at a family reunion, at a class reunion, even at the doctor's office when you have to tell them their form's wrong. Those interactions actually do change the world. They add up to something that's cumulatively powerful. And I just, on behalf of Sandy and I, want to thank you for letting us tell you about our contribution to this gigantic effort that we're all really engaged in. You wouldn't be here if you didn't care a lot about it and you weren't out there advocating yourselves. I'm sure you are. And we need all of our voices singing in unison on this issue of fairness and equality, because the more diverse and inclusive we are, the stronger we are. So thank you for having us here.
Yeah, and we just want to thank you so much for your leadership over the years. I mean, this takes a toll, kind of personally, time-wise, financially, all of that. And civil rights movements, as you said, are just built over generations, over decades, and everyone adds a little bit. And you guys have clearly added a huge block to it. And so hopefully we'll all kind of take that and continue to move forward with you guys. And also, I think just you guys are clearly very articulate and inspirational. So I think the other thing that you guys have brought is probably just inspiring thousands of others to advocate for whatever equality that they feel is important in their own way. So thank you very much for everything.
Thank you.